The stars outside the viewport of the Eos shimmered like scattered diamonds against the endless blackness of space. Humanity's first deep space exploration vessel had traveled farther than any ship before it, venturing into regions of the galaxy no human eyes had ever seen. Captain Amara Voss stood silently on the bridge, her sharp gaze fixed on the swirling nebula ahead. She was a woman of quiet determination, known for making tough decisions under pressure. But even she couldn't have predicted what was about to happen. Captain, called Lieutenant Ravi Patel, the ship's communications officer, his voice tinged with excitement. "We're picking up something unusual, some kind of signal." Amara turned toward him, her brow furrowing. "A signal? From where?" "It's coming from that dying star system we detected earlier," Patel replied, pointing to a cluster of dimming suns on the main display. "It's faint, but it's definitely artificial. It doesn't match any known frequencies." The crew exchanged curious glances. Artificial signals were rare in uncharted space, and finding one here felt like discovering a needle in a haystack the size of the universe. Amara gave a curt nod. "Bring it up on the speakers. Let's hear it." For a moment, there was only static. Then came a sound, a haunting melody made up of strange harmonics that seemed to resonate deep within their chests. It wasn't speech or language as they knew it, but it carried an undeniable intelligence. The notes rose and fell like waves, each pulse filled with emotion, longing, despair, and hope all woven together. "What is this?" asked Dr. Elias Kane, the ship's lead scientist, leaning closer to the console. His wiry frame and restless energy made him seem perpetually out of place among the more disciplined crew members, but his brilliance was unmatched. "It's not just random noise, it's structured." Amara crossed her arms, her mind racing. Could it be a distress call? "It might be," said Patel hesitantly. "But if so, whoever sent it isn't using anything close to our tech. This signal has been traveling for centuries, maybe longer." The implications hung heavy in the air. If the signal was ancient, then its creators could be long gone, or worse, still out there, waiting. Curiosity burned bright in everyone's eyes, but so did caution. Space was vast and unpredictable, and humanity had learned the hard way that not everything in the cosmos was friendly. "We need to investigate," Amara declared firmly, breaking the silence. "Plot a course for the origin point. Maximum speed." As the Eos adjusted its trajectory, the crew prepared for the unknown. Some checked equipment, others ran simulations of potential scenarios. Meanwhile, Dr. Kane pored over fragments of the signal, trying to decipher its meaning. He noticed patterns repeating at intervals, almost like coordinates embedded within the music. Could it be a map, a warning, or something else entirely? Hours passed as the ship hurtled through the void. When they finally reached the source of the signal, the sight left them awestruck. A small barren planet orbited a fading red giant star. Its surface was cracked and lifeless, yet structures jutted out of the ground like jagged teeth, ruins of some forgotten civilization. "This can't be natural," whispered Lieutenant Marisolis, the ship's navigator, her voice trembling with awe. "Whoever built this, they were incredible." Amara stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Incredible or not, they're gone now. But whatever they left behind brought us here, and we're going to find out why." The crew suited up and descended to the planet's surface, unaware that their discovery would change the fate of two civilizations, and perhaps the entire galaxy. The surface of the barren planet was eerily silent. The air, what little there was, felt heavy, as though it carried the weight of centuries past. Captain Amara Voss led her team cautiously across the cracked terrain, their boots kicking up clouds of fine gray dust that shimmered faintly in the dim light of the dying star above. The ruins loomed ahead, jagged and alien, their crystalline structures reflecting the weak sunlight like broken mirrors. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Lieutenant Marisolis under her breath as she scanned the area with her handheld sensor. "Feels like we're walking through a graveyard." Dr. Elias Kane adjusted his glasses, his usual enthusiasm tempered by the somber atmosphere. "Technically, you're not wrong," he said quietly. "These ruins are all that's left of whoever sent that signal. If they were still alive, this wouldn't look so dead." As they approached the largest structure, a towering spire made of translucent material, they noticed strange symbols etched into its surface. The markings glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Amara reached out tentatively to touch one of the glowing glyphs, but Dr. Kane stopped her. "Careful, Captain," he warned. "We don't know what kind of tech we're dealing with here. For all we know, these things could be booby-trapped." Amara pulled her hand back, nodding. "Understood. Let's proceed carefully." Inside the spire, the air grew colder, and the faint hum from outside became louder, vibrating through their suits. The walls were lined with more of the glowing symbols, forming intricate patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. At the center of the chamber stood a massive crystalline pedestal, its surface fractured but still radiating faint energy. "What is this?" asked Lieutenant Patel, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Some kind of control panel." "It's possible," replied Dr. Kane, already crouching beside the pedestal to examine it. "But if it is, it's far beyond anything humans have ever created. Look at these circuits. They're embedded directly into the crystal lattice. This isn't just advanced technology, it's art." While Kane worked on analyzing the pedestal, Lieutenant Solis wandered toward the far end of the chamber. There, she found something unexpected. A series of holographic projections flickering weakly against the wall. They depicted scenes of an alien civilization, the HFY, going about their daily lives. Tall, slender beings with smooth, iridescent skin moved gracefully among towering cities filled with light and color. But as the images continued, the tone shifted. The once vibrant cityscapes turned dark and chaotic, consumed by fire and shadow. In the final projection, a monstrous entity loomed over the horizon, a swirling mass of black tendrils devouring everything in its path. "Captain," Solis called out urgently, "you need to see this." Amara and the others rushed over, their faces pale as they watched the horrifying sequence play out. When the last image faded, silence fell over the group. "That thing," Amara said finally, breaking the quiet. "Whatever it is, it destroyed them." Kane nodded grimly. "And based on the timeline encoded in these projections, it happened thousands of years ago. Whoever, or whatever, the HFY were, they didn't stand a chance." "But why send a signal now?" Solis asked, her voice trembling. "Why call for help after all this time?" Before anyone could answer, the pedestal emitted a sudden burst of light, startling them. The glowing symbols around the chamber flared brighter, and a low, resonant tone filled the air. It wasn't aggressive. It felt more like a response. "They're trying to communicate," Kane realized, his eyes wide with wonder. "Even after all these years, their systems are still active. They must have been waiting for someone like us." Amara clenched her fists, determination hardening her features. "Then we're going to find out what they want. Because if that thing out there is still a threat, it's not just their problem anymore. It's ours too." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, knowing they had crossed a threshold they couldn't turn back from. Whatever secrets the HFY had left behind, humanity was now part of their story, and possibly their salvation. Back aboard the EOS, Dr. Elias Kane sat hunched over his workstation in the lab, surrounded by fragments of the crystalline artifacts they had brought back from the ruins. His fingers danced across a holographic interface as he analyzed their composition, his mind racing with possibilities. The glowing symbols etched into the crystals seemed to pulse faintly, almost like they were alive. Despite his excitement, Kane couldn't shake the feeling that he was tampering with something far beyond human understanding. "Careful, Doc," Lieutenant Solis said from the doorway, her arms crossed. "You're starting to look like one of those mad scientists in old movies." Kane chuckled nervously, but didn't take his eyes off the artifact. If I were a mad scientist, I'd at least have a dramatic lightning storm outside. This is just cautious experimentation. Solis rolled her eyes and stepped closer, peering at the crystal. Any luck figuring out what it does? Not yet, Kane admitted. But these symbols, they're not random. They're instructions, or maybe warnings. He hesitated, then added, I think activating this thing might be our only way to understand what happened to the Xiaolin, and why they sent that signal. Before Solis could respond, Kane's hand brushed against a jagged edge of the crystal. A sudden surge of energy shot through the room, causing the lights to flicker violently. The crew froze as the artifact began to glow brighter, its surface rippling like liquid. Then, without warning, a figure materialized above it, a shimmering hologram made entirely of light. The entity stood tall, humanoid but distinctly alien, its form composed of shifting patterns of blue and silver. It regarded them silently for a moment before speaking in a voice that resonated deep within their chests. I am Sylith, it said, its tone calm yet commanding, guardian of the Xiaolin legacy. The crew stared in stunned silence. Captain Amara Voss entered the lab just in time to hear the introduction, her sharp gaze locked on the hologram. What, or who, are you? She demanded. I am an artificial intelligence created by the Xiaolin to preserve their knowledge, Sylith replied. My purpose is to guide those chosen to carry their hope forward. Chosen? Amara echoed, raising an eyebrow. What do you mean chosen? We just stumbled upon your planet. Sylith tilted its head slightly, as if considering her words. You are here because the Xiaolin foresaw it. Before their extinction, they encoded prophecies into their technology, prophecies foretelling the arrival of beings capable of wielding their power, beings with untapped potential. You call yourselves humans. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Potential for what? Solis asked cautiously. To save us and yourselves, Sylith answered. The force that destroyed my creators, the Vorith, is still active. It consumes stars, planets, life itself. If left unchecked, it will spread until nothing remains. Amara frowned. Why didn't the Xiaolin stop it themselves? They were advanced enough to build all this. They tried, Sylith said solemnly. But the Vorith adapts. It evolves faster than any species can counter it. My creators believed that only beings with creativity, adaptability, and resilience could succeed where they failed. That is why they entrusted their fate, and yours, to humanity. Dr. Kane leaned forward, his curiosity outweighing his caution. So how do we fight something like that? What makes us so special? You possess latent abilities, Sylith explained. Abilities that can be unlocked through synchronization with Xiaolin technology. But beware, the process will test your limits. Many may fail. The weight of Sylith's words settled heavily over the group. Amara stepped forward, her expression resolute. We didn't ask for this responsibility, but we won't turn away from it either. Tell us what we need to do. Sylith's form shimmered briefly, as though acknowledging her determination. Very well. Prepare yourselves. The path ahead is perilous, but failure is not an option for any of us. As the hologram faded, the crew remained silent, each lost in their thoughts. They had come seeking answers, but instead they found a burden greater than they could have imagined. Yet beneath the fear and uncertainty, a spark of hope began to grow. For better or worse, humanity had been thrust into the role of saviors. And there was no turning back now. The hologram of Sylith reappeared in the lab, its shimmering form casting faint reflections on the metallic walls of the EOS. The crew gathered around, their faces a mix of awe and apprehension. Captain Amara Voss stood at the center, her arms crossed as she listened intently. Explain this, Vorith, Amara said firmly. What exactly are we dealing with? Sylith's light pulsed softly, as though gathering its thoughts. The Vorith is not a single entity, but a collective, a parasitic swarm that consumes energy to survive. It feeds on stars, planets, and even living beings, draining them until nothing remains. Its hunger knows no bounds. Lieutenant Marisolis frowned, leaning forward. So, it's like a cosmic plague, something that spreads and destroys everything in its path. In essence, yes, Sylith replied. But unlike plagues you may know, the Vorith cannot be contained or eradicated through conventional means. It adapts rapidly, evolving to overcome any defense. My creators, the Echelon, once wielded technology far beyond your current understanding, yet they fell to its relentless advance. Dr. Elias Kane adjusted his glasses, his mind racing. If it's so unstoppable, how do you expect us to fight it? You mentioned something about latent abilities earlier. What did you mean by that? The key lies in synchronization. Sylith explained. Your species possesses unique qualities, creativity, adaptability, and resilience that make you capable of interfacing directly with Shaolin technology. By merging your consciousness with our systems, you can access tools and weapons designed specifically to disrupt the Vorith's core structure. Amara raised an eyebrow. You're saying we have to connect our minds to alien tech? That sounds risky. It is, Sylith admitted without hesitation. The process requires immense focus and mental strength. Those who attempt it will face significant strain, both physical and psychological. Some may not survive. The room fell silent as the weight of Sylith's words sank in. Lieutenant Ravi Patel broke the quiet, his voice tinged with unease. And if we refuse? If we decide this isn't our fight? Sylith's glow dimmed slightly, almost sorrowful. Then the Vorith will continue unchecked. It has already consumed countless civilizations across the galaxy. Your world, and countless others, will eventually fall under its shadow. Lieutenant Solis clenched her fists, her frustration bubbling over. This feels like a lot to dump on us. We're just humans. How are we supposed to save entire galaxies when we can barely keep peace on our own planet? Amara placed a calming hand on Solis's shoulder before addressing Sylith. Tell us more about this synchronization process. What does it involve? And how do we prepare for it? Sylith's form brightened again, signaling readiness. The crystalline artifacts you recovered contain neural interfaces capable of linking your minds to Shaolin systems. Through training and practice, you can learn to control these connections. However, mastery will require time and sacrifice. Dr. Kane leaned closer, his curiosity overriding his fear. Time is something we might not have. Is there any way to predict when, or where, the Vorith will strike next? Sylith hesitated, its light flickering briefly. The Vorith operates unpredictably, drawn to sources of concentrated energy. Your star system emits such signals, making it vulnerable. But I sense another attack looming elsewhere, a populated system near your location. Amara straightened, her jaw tightening. If that's true, then we don't have a choice. We'll start preparing immediately. Whatever this thing is, we're going to stop it. As the meeting ended, the crew dispersed, each grappling with the enormity of what lay ahead. In the silence of her quarters, Amara stared out at the stars, her resolve hardening. Humanity had always been explorers, dreamers, survivors. Now they would become something more. Protectors of the cosmos, whether they were ready or not. Little did they know, the first test of their newfound destiny was closer than they realized. Back on Earth, news of the discovery spread like wildfire. The faint signal from the void, the ruins of an ancient alien civilization, and the ominous warning about a cosmic parasite. All of it became headline stories across every media outlet. Humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial life wasn't just historic, it was terrifying. Governments scrambled to respond. Debates erupted in global forums, and public opinion split into two camps. Those who saw this as humanity's chance to step onto the galactic stage as heroes, and those who feared that meddling in alien affairs could doom them all. Captain Amara Voss stood stiffly in front of a video screen aboard the EOS, listening to the heated arguments coming from Earth's United Council. Representatives from nations around the world argued over what to do next. Some demanded immediate action, urging the crew to prepare for battle against the Vorath. Others insisted that the EOs return home immediately, claiming that humanity wasn't ready to face such a threat. "We've barely scratched the surface of our own solar system," one council member shouted, his face red with frustration. "How can we possibly take on something that wiped out an advanced alien race?" "That's exactly why we must act," countered another, slamming her fist on the table. "If we don't stop this thing now, it'll come for us later. At least this way, we have a fighting chance." Amara sighed quietly, rubbing her temples. She had expected disagreement, but not to this extent. The pressure weighed heavily on her shoulders. As captain of the EOs, she was responsible for making decisions, not only for her crew, but potentially for the entire human race. Meanwhile, tensions aboard the ship were rising too. Lieutenant Mara Solis sat alone in the mess hall, staring at a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Her thoughts swirled with doubt and fear. Was humanity truly ready for this? Could they really save anyone when they struggled so much to save themselves? Dr. Elias Kane entered the room, noticing her troubled expression. He slid into the seat across from her. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the galaxy," he said lightly, trying to lighten the mood. Solis gave him a weak smile. "Feels like I am." "What if we fail, Doc? What if we make things worse?" Kane leaned back, his usual enthusiasm tempered by seriousness. "Failure isn't an option. Not anymore. But honestly, I think you're worrying about the wrong thing." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? What should I be worried about?" "That we might actually succeed," he replied with a wry grin. "Imagine being part of the team that saves the galaxy. Talk about pressure." Despite herself, Solis chuckled softly. "Thanks, Doc. I needed that." Elsewhere on the ship, Lieutenant Ravi Patel worked tirelessly in the communications bay, monitoring incoming messages from Earth. Among them were pleas from ordinary citizens, some offering support, others begging the crew to abandon their mission. One message stood out, a young girl's voice saying simply, "Please protect us." It stuck with Patel, reminding him why they had embarked on this journey in the first place. Captain Voss called a meeting with her senior staff to discuss their next steps. "We can't wait for Earth to decide what's best," she declared firmly. "If Sylith is right, and I believe it is, the Vorath won't give us time to debate. We need to start training now." "But some of the crew won't agree," Solis pointed out. "They joined this mission to explore, not to fight." "And yet here we are," Amara said, her tone unwavering. "This isn't just about us anymore. Whether we like it or not, humanity has been thrust into a role we never asked for, but one we can't ignore. If we turn away, billions will die. Maybe even trillions." Her words silenced any lingering protests. As the meeting ended, the crew dispersed, each grappling with their own fears and doubts. But beneath it all, a shared resolve began to form. They had chosen to venture into the unknown, and now the unknown had chosen them. The EOs prepared for war, though none of them knew what horrors awaited. Yet amid the uncertainty, one truth remained clear. Whatever happened next, humanity would face it together, or not at all. The training chamber aboard the EOs buzzed with energy, both literal and figurative. Dr. Elias Kane stood at the center of the room, surrounded by glowing crystalline artifacts that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly light. The crew gathered around him, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. This was it, the moment they would begin unlocking the secrets of Shalan technology. "All right, listen up," Kane said, his voice steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. "Sylith has given us access to these neural interfaces, but using them isn't as simple as flipping a switch. It requires focus, discipline, and trust." Lieutenant Mara Solis raised her hand hesitantly. "Trust? Trust in what? These things are alien tech we barely understand." Kane nodded. "Exactly. And that's why this is going to feel Strange. When you connect with the crystals, your mind will synchronize with their systems. You'll experience sensations you've never felt before, visions, emotions, even fragments of the Xiaolin's collective memory. Captain Amara Voss stepped forward, her arms crossed. How dangerous is this process? It depends on the individual, Kane admitted. Some may adapt quickly, others might struggle or collapse under the strain. But Sylith assures me that no permanent harm should come if we proceed carefully. Amara exchanged glances with her crew, then turned back to Kane. Let's start small. Who's volunteering first? To everyone's surprise, Lieutenant Solis stepped forward without hesitation. I'll do it. Kane blinked, taken aback by her sudden determination. Are you sure? This isn't like running simulations. Once you're connected, there's no turning back until the session ends. Unsure, Solis replied firmly. If this thing is going to work, someone needs to take the risk. Might as well be me. With a nod from Amara, Kane guided Solis to one of the larger crystals. He attached a series of thin wires to her temples, connecting her to the interface. As he activated the system, the crystal began to glow brighter, its surface rippling like liquid. Close your eyes and breathe deeply, Kane instructed. Let the connection guide you. Don't fight it. Solis obeyed, closing her eyes as the hum of the crystal grew louder. At first, she felt nothing but warmth spreading through her body. Then came the visions, flashes of towering cities bathed in golden light, followed by scenes of chaos and destruction. She saw the Voreth up close for the first time, a writhing mass of black tendrils consuming everything in its path. Panic surged within her, but Kane's voice cut through the haze. Stay calm, Lieutenant. Focus on the rhythm of the crystal. Let it anchor you. Gradually, Solis regained control, her breathing steadying as the images shifted. Now she saw herself wielding a weapon unlike anything she'd ever imagined, a blade of pure energy fueled by her own thoughts. It was exhilarating yet exhausting, and when the connection finally broke, she collapsed to her knees, drenched in sweat. Well, Amara asked, helping Solis to her feet. What did you see? Solis wiped her brow, still catching her breath. It's incredible. Terrifying, but incredible. I think I can do it. I think I can fight. Her words inspired the rest of the crew. One by one, they volunteered to undergo the synchronization process, each facing their own challenges. Some struggled with overwhelming emotions, while others battled waves of nausea. Yet, slowly but surely, they began to master the basics of controlling the Xiaolin tech. As days passed, the crew transformed. Their movements became sharper, more coordinated, as though guided by an unseen force. Even Amara joined the sessions, discovering a latent strength she hadn't known she possessed. Through trial and error, they learned how to channel their thoughts into the crystals, creating bursts of energy capable of disrupting simulated targets. But the training wasn't without cost. Fatigue weighed heavily on everyone, and tensions occasionally flared as frustrations mounted. Still, the shared goal kept them united. They were no longer just explorers. They were warriors preparing for a battle that could decide the fate of the galaxy. One evening, as Solis stared out at the stars, she realized something profound. Humanity had always been defined by its ability to adapt, to rise above adversity. Now, standing on the brink of a cosmic war, they were proving once again that survival wasn't just about enduring, it was about evolving. The EOS raced through the void, its engines roaring at maximum capacity. The crew had received an urgent transmission from Sylith, a warning that the Voreth was approaching a populated star system nearby. Billions of lives hung in the balance, and though Earth's leaders were still debating whether to intervene, Captain Amara Voss made the call herself. We're not waiting for permission, she declared firmly on the bridge. If we don't act now, those people will die. That's on us. Her decision wasn't unanimous. Lieutenant Mara Solis supported her fully, but others, like Dr. Elias Kane, expressed doubts. We're not ready, he argued. Our training is incomplete. Rushing into this could get everyone killed. We'll never be ready if we keep hesitating, Amara countered. This is why we're here, to protect those who can't protect themselves. With no time to waste, the crew prepared for their first confrontation with the Vorith. The crystalline weapons hummed softly as they powered up, their surfaces glowing with energy channeled directly from the synchronized minds of the crew. Each member carried the weight of responsibility and fear, but none more so than Solus, who had volunteered to lead the assault team. When they arrived at the targeted system, the devastation was already underway. A massive planet loomed ahead, its atmosphere shredded by swirling tendrils of darkness. The Vorith, its presence radiated menace, blotting out stars and sucking the life from everything it touched. Debris floated in orbit where satellites and space stations once thrived, reduced to nothing but wreckage. Target locked, Lieutenant Ravi Patil announced from his station. Deploying weapon systems. Amara gave the order, and the EOS unleashed its payload. Bursts of concentrated energy fired directly at the Vorith's core. For a moment, it seemed to work. The tendrils recoiled, retreating slightly as if stunned. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but the victory was short-lived. Without warning, the Vorith retaliated. It lashed out with tendrils faster than anything the crew had anticipated, striking the EOS with brutal force. Alarms blared as the ship shuddered violently, throwing several crew members off their feet. "Shields are failing," Patel shouted over the chaos. "We can't take another hit like that." Solus clenched her fists, her heart pounding. "Then we go in closer. We have to finish this before it regenerates." Against protocol, she led a small team aboard a dropship, flying dangerously close to the Vorith's pulsating core. Activating her neural link with the Shalan tech, she raised her weapon, a shimmering blade of pure energy, and struck repeatedly at the tendrils. The effort drained her physically and mentally, but she refused to give up. Behind her, the rest of the team followed suit, their combined attacks forcing the creature to retreat further. But the cost was high. In their desperation, one misplaced shot destabilized part of the planet's fragile crust, triggering catastrophic earthquakes below. Cities crumbled, and millions perished despite the crew's best intentions. Back aboard the EOS, the mood was somber. Though they had driven the Vorith away temporarily, guilt weighed heavily on everyone, especially Solus. She stared at her trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "I did this," she whispered. "I failed them." Amara placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "You saved billions today. Don't forget that. But we've learned something important. We need better control. Next time, we won't make the same mistakes." As the EOS limped back toward Earth, messages poured in from survivors of the attacked system. Gratitude mixed with grief, but one message stood out. "Thank you for trying." Those 4 words echoed in the hearts of the crew, reminding them why they fought and why they had to keep fighting. Back on Earth, the aftermath of the botched mission dominated headlines. Footage of the battle against the Vorith had leaked to the media, showing both the bravery of the EOS crew and the devastation their actions inadvertently caused. Public opinion was divided. Some hailed them as heroes who risked everything to save billions, while others condemned them for the collateral damage that claimed millions of lives. Lieutenant Mira Solus sat alone in her quarters aboard the EOS, replaying the events over and over in her mind. The faces of the survivors haunted her. Their gratitude felt hollow when weighed against the destruction she couldn't prevent. "I should have been better," she muttered under her breath, her voice trembling with self-loathing. "They trusted me, and I let them down." Captain Amara Voss entered quietly, closing the door behind her. She didn't say anything at first, simply sitting beside Solus and letting the silence settle between them. Finally, she spoke softly. "You're not the only one carrying this weight, Mara. We all feel it. But dwelling on what went wrong won't change anything. What matters now is how we move forward." Solus looked up, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "How do you move forward after something like that? How do you face yourself in the mirror?" "You focus on the lives we saved," Amara replied firmly. And you use this pain to push harder, to train smarter, fight stronger, and ensure that next time, we don't fail. Her words struck a chord. Slowly but surely, the warning came too late. Despite Earth's best efforts to prepare, the Vorath struck with terrifying speed and precision. Its massive form loomed over the planet like a storm cloud of death, tendrils stretching across continents, draining energy from cities, and leaving behind only desolation. Panic spread as billions scrambled for shelter, their cries echoing through the airwaves. Humanity's greatest fear had arrived. The end was here. Captain Amara Voss stood resolute on the bridge of the Eos, her eyes fixed on the monstrous entity consuming her home. All hands to battle stations, she commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. This is it. No retreat. No surrender. Lieutenant Mara Solis took a deep breath, clutching the crystalline weapon in her hand. It pulsed faintly, responding to her racing heartbeat. She had trained for this moment, endured countless failures, and carried the weight of past mistakes. Now, there was no room for doubt, only resolve. "Let's finish this," she said firmly, meeting Amara's gaze. The Eos led the charge, flanked by hastily assembled fleets from across Earth. Ships of all sizes, military vessels, repurposed cargo haulers, even civilian crafts armed with makeshift weapons, formed a united front against the Vorath. The sight was both awe-inspiring and heartbreaking. Humanity had risen together in its darkest hour, but the odds were overwhelmingly stacked against them. As they approached the Vorath, Scythe materialized on the bridge once more. Its light flickered anxiously, betraying an uncharacteristic urgency. "You must strike at its core," it urged. "But be warned, the process will require immense focus and sacrifice. Only one pilot can complete the task." Solis stepped forward without hesitation. "I'll do it." Amara hesitated, her protective instincts warring with the knowledge that Solis was the most qualified. Finally, she nodded. "Bring us in close. Cover her every move." The battle erupted in full force. Explosions lit up space as human ships fired relentlessly at the Vorath's outer layers, trying to weaken its defenses. Tendrils lashed out, tearing through hulls and scattering debris. But the coalition held firm. For every ship lost, 2 more surged forward, driven by sheer determination. Inside her cockpit, Solis activated the neural interface, merging her consciousness with the Shallan tech. Her vision blurred as she entered a trance-like state, her mind sensing perfectly with the crystal. Around her, time seemed to slow, and she could feel the flow of energy coursing through her veins. With a surge of effort, she guided her ship straight toward the Vorath's pulsating core. The creature retaliated violently, sending wave after wave of attacks to stop her. But Solis didn't falter. Every instinct screamed at her to pull back, yet she pushed forward, channeling everything she had into the assault. Behind her, the crew of the Eos fought desperately to shield her path, their sacrifices paving the way for her final approach. Finally, she reached the core. Summoning every ounce of strength, Solis unleashed the full power of the Shallan weapon, a blinding burst of energy that tore through the Vorath's essence. The impact rippled outward, destabilizing the creature's structure. For a moment, it writhed in agony before collapsing inward, consumed by its own destruction. Exhausted and barely conscious, Solis slumped in her seat as cheers erupted across the fleet. The Vorath was gone. Back aboard the Eos, Amara watched the dying embers of the battle fade away. Humanity had won, but at great cost. As the survivors began the long journey toward recovery, one truth became clear. They had proven themselves not just as explorers or fighters, but as guardians of life itself. Hope remained, fragile but unbroken. The aftermath of the battle left Earth scared but alive. The skies that had once shimmered with sunlight were now streaked with ash and dust, remnants of the Vorath's assault. Yet amidst the devastation, a new spirit emerged, one of resilience and unity. Billions mourned their losses, but they also celebrated survival. Humanity had stared into the abyss and refused to back down, proving to themselves and the galaxy that they were more than just inhabitants of a single planet. They were protectors of life. Lieutenant Marisolis stood on the observation deck of the Eos, her body still weak from the strain of wielding the Shallan weapon. She gazed at Earth below, its surface mirrored yet beautiful in its fragility. For so long, she carried guilt for the mistakes of her first encounter with the Forth. Now, as messages of gratitude poured in from across the globe, and even from distant star systems, she finally allowed herself to feel something else: pride. "You did it," Captain Amaravos said, joining her. Her voice was calm but tinged with awe. "You saved us all." Solis shook her head slightly. "Not just me. Everyone played their part. The crew, the volunteers, every person who stepped up when we needed them most." She paused, her eyes reflecting the pale glow of the damaged planet beneath them. "But this isn't over, is it? There are other threats out there, other civilizations that might need help." Amara nodded solemnly. "That's true, but we're not alone anymore. We've proven we can stand against the darkness, and if others come calling, we'll answer." As repairs began on Earth and the Eos, Sylith reappeared one last time. Its form flickered faintly, as though its energy was fading. "Your actions have fulfilled the prophecy of my creators," it said, its resonant voice softer than before. "The Shallan believed humanity would rise above its limitations and become something greater. You have honored their faith. What happens to you now?" Dr. Elias Kane asked, stepping closer. "Will you stay with us?" "My purpose is complete," Sylith replied. "But before I go, I leave you this." A cascade of data streamed into the ship's systems: blueprints for advanced technologies, knowledge of distant worlds, and warnings about potential dangers lurking in the cosmos. Use these wisely. They are tools to safeguard peace, not fuel conflict. With those final words, Sylith dissolved into a burst of light, leaving behind an eerie silence. The crew exchanged glances, each feeling a mix of gratitude and loss. Though the AI was gone, its legacy lived on, not only in the technology it had entrusted to them, but in the hope it had inspired. Back on Earth, global cooperation reached unprecedented levels. Nations worked together to rebuild cities, heal ecosystems, and fortify defenses. Survivors of the attacked star system sent ambassadors to thank humanity personally, forging alliances that transcended borders and species. Humanity had taken its first steps toward becoming part of a galactic community, a role no one had expected but many now embraced. Captain Voss gathered her crew in the mess hall for one last meeting before departure. "This mission has changed us all," she said, looking around at the weary but determined faces. "We started as explorers, became warriors, and now we're guardians. Whatever lies ahead, we face it together." Cheers erupted, followed by laughter and tears. Despite everything they'd endured, there was joy in knowing they had made a difference, not just for themselves, but for countless others. Days later, the Eos launched once more into the vast unknown. Its destination wasn't marked on any map. Its mission wasn't dictated by orders from Earth. Instead, it ventured forth as a symbol of hope, a beacon for those in need, and a shield against the shadows of the cosmos. As the stars stretched into streaks of light outside the viewport, Lieutenant Solis whispered to herself, "We're ready." And somewhere deep within the void, the echoes of humanity's courage began to ripple outward, heralding a new era of peace and possibility among the stars.